You're live, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Berna. Good evening and welcome to this North West Area Planning Committee on the 10th of January 2024. A belated Happy New Year to everybody. I trust everybody had a good festive season and is back ready for the fray of 2024. My name is Councillor Mark Durham and I'm the chairman of this committee. Councillor Thompson is now in the house. Good evening, Councillor Thompson. I'm fine, that's fine. Members, we are streaming this meeting live as well as recording and by being present in the meeting. You are giving your consent to being recorded. During each item, please put your hand up to indicate if you wish to speak. I will then invite you at the appropriate time. Could I ask members to avoid approaching the top table as this could create interference with the cameras and the live stream. And please note that the YouTube live stream sound recording is dependent on the correct use of microphones. Therefore, can I ask when invited to speak, you remember to turn on your microphone and turn it off when finished. Please reference a page or paragraph number when referring to the agenda papers and keep your contributions as clear and concise as possible. And I will add tonight, because of the agenda, please don't repeat things that have already been stated. Item 2, apologies for absence. Ms Casey, have you any apologies, please?
Yes, we received an apology perhaps from Councillor Siddle, but I believe Councillor Spenceley may also be an apology for absence. Is that correct, Councillor Paula Spenceley?
Councillor Spenceley is not a member of this committee, Ms Casey. No, we have two other councillors that are just in attendance for your information. We have Councillor Lagan and Councillor Nick Spenceley, but they are just in an observational role. Item 3, minutes. It's recommended that the minutes of the meeting held on the 6th, are we all right, Councillor? Yes, thank you. 6th of December, found on the pages, I'm sure you can find them, are approved and a true and accurate record. I so move. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Thompson, you were first. Thank you. Members, any points of accuracy on those minutes? Nobody is showing. And can we agree by assent? Everybody happy? Thank you very much indeed. Item 4, declarations of interest to disclose the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interests, other registrable interests and non-registrable interests relating to items of business on the agenda, having regard to paragraph 9 and Appendix B of the Code of Conduct for members. And members, you are reminded that you are also required to disclose any such interest as soon as you become aware should the need arise through the meeting. Members, please show if you have an interest. No, I will declare that I am currently the chairman of Visit Essex, although that is an other registrable interest and has no pecuniary interest. Item 5. Members, I think I've told you all anyway that due to public interest in relation to item 6 on the agenda, I'm going to take that first, which will enable the people that are here in support of that application who are occupying the public seats. They will be able to leave if should they wish. They can stay, of course, but to allow people that are here for the other items on the agenda. So that moves us neatly round to item 6, 23/00920, full Granary, Chigborough Farm, Chigborough Road, Little Totham, Essex. And I think Mrs Matthews, you're taking this.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Good evening, Chairman. Good evening, members. So this is an application at Chigborough Farm it's a Section 73A application, which means it's retrospective for a change of use of an agricultural building to a cafe, Class E use, and provision of associated car parking. I draw members' attention to the members' update, which has previously been circulated, which includes Heybridge Parish Council's response and further letters of representation which were received. Since that was produced, there have been further letters of support that have been received or put on the system, and there's a total of 480 letters of support, including those that have already on the agenda and the update. A further verbal update is the applicants confirmed that their offer to permanently close the former restaurant use at the Chigborough farm, known as the Lodge, which is understood to have closed 2 years ago. As the Lodge is not within the application site, it would not be possible to impose a condition if planning permission were to be granted, but as the Lodge is within the same ownership as the cafe, it will be possible to secure the permanent cessation of the use of the Lodge as a restaurant. And having spoken to the council solicitor earlier today, it will need to be through a Section 106 agreement, and that would obviously be subject to the agreement of the applicant. So this is the slide which shows the application site boundary, which includes the former agricultural building towards the northern end and the car parking area towards the south, and also includes part of Chigborough of the road and the footpath link that has been created between the two. And the cafe itself is on the western side of Chigborough Road, and within a group of buildings, including the farmhouse and the eastern side, and also the eastern side of Chigborough Road, which I've said is is where the car parking is located. The site is within the rural area, outside any settlement boundary. It's about 1 kilometre away as a crow flies from Heybridge and Heybridge Basin. This is a proposed block plan which shows the former agricultural building at the northern end, and then in front of there you've got the disabled parking spaces and a cycle store, and then at the southern end you've got the car parking area which is proposed. The footpath link that's been created between the two is within the highway verge, and has got a hogging type of surface treatment. The car park includes around the car parking is 33 spaces. These are the elevations of the barn as was existing prior to its conversion, and then you've got a layout there again of the barn prior to its conversion. And the application relates to about 120 square metres of floor space. These are proposed elevations which are very similar to the existing elevations as well. There's been minimal alterations required to the building. And then you've got the proposed layout, which includes a seating area, prep area, kitchen and toilets. There's no actual detailed layout being provided, but as part of the application stated that up to 40 covers would be available within the cafe, and the proposal also includes an external seating area of around 106 square metres, which is directly in front of the building. And then here are just some photos, just for illustrative purposes. So we've got the converted barn, you've got the vehicle entrance to the courtyard underneath that, and you've got a picture of the footpath along the grass verge, and then you've got the car parking area at the southern end of the site. In summary, it's not considered that the cafe use proposed is ancillary to the wider site, certainly based on the information that's been provided as part of the application. Therefore, the development represents the introduction of a cafe outside the main towns, villages and employment areas, which is contrary to policies S8, E2 and E4, the local development plan. Furthermore, based on the information submitted as part of the application, it's not been demonstrated that the cafe meets the needs of local businesses or the community. Therefore, objection to the principal development is raised. And I was going to use this opportunity in anticipation of questions which may be asked this evening, which hopefully will just be helpful. So statutory consultees have not objected, but their comments are limited to their area of expertise, which does not cover all of the material planning considerations relevant to the application. It's recognised that the proposal has generated considerable level of support, particularly since the agenda was published. The officers have assessed the proposal against the relevant policies in the local development plan and the MPF. And in summary, the current LDP policies in particular do not allow for new cafes / restaurants to be created in the rural area unless they are, for example, an ancillary element of a wider site, for example, a cafe at a garden centre or restaurant within a caravan park, i.e. one which would be patroned primarily by customers of the garden centre or the caravan park in the examples that I gave. Officers are aware that there are a number of leisure and other commercial uses operated from the Chigborough farm, but there is insufficient information submitted for officers to be able to conclude that the cafe use of the size proposed is ancillary. If the cafe is not ancillary, there would need to be other material considerations which would outweigh the conflict with the policies E2 and E4 referred to. And policy E2 in particular aims to protect the vitality of the district's town centres. Public support for a cafe is not the same as there being a functional other need for the use proposed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Matthews. We have, I'm not sure how many public speakers. I know we have the applicant, Mr. Tallowin. Bernard, do we have any other speakers registered?
No, we've only got one registered as a supporter, but Mr. Tallowin.
Mr. Tallowin, would you like to go and take a seat, probably, or next to Councillor? Yeah, oh, there, that's fine. Councillor Morgan has very kindly put the light on. You have 2 minutes. It is a strict 2 minutes, I'm afraid, from when you start to speak.
Thank you. There has been a restaurant in operation at Chigborough Farm for over 40 years under planning permission granted in 1982, which coincided with the opening of Chigborough Fisheries. We're not seeking to open a new restaurant, we're just trying to move the current planning consent from Chigborough Lodge to a disused agricultural bar on the other side of our courtyard. If it must come to a vote on whether the cafe is ancillary to the activities and businesses at Chigborough, then you must decide objectively who understands this best. Either my wife and I, who have run this business for over 20 years as a tourist destination, or a planning officer who has had limited time, no pre-application procedure, and an unwillingness to communicate. We can say for certain that the cafe is ancillary, and we have 40 years of history to prove this. The former restaurant has been closed for 2 years now, and it's self-evident that it cannot be considered a viable alternative. If we need to write this into a unilateral undertaking of permanent closure, then I'm more than happy to do this. Planning must take into account the balance of a decision. In this case, there are only negative consequences of a refusal and only positive outcomes of an acceptance. A disproportionate weight of objection has been laboured on just one point, which is not equal in weight to the potential loss of tourism, employment, health and well-being, farm diversification and overall synergy of business activities at Chigborough. Nowhere in the LDP or NPPF does it state that cafes and restaurants are exclusively a town centre activity. This constitutes a serious misreading and catastrophic bias. Furthermore, planning officer has failed to demonstrate that the farm cafe and outside catering business would be a viable proposition in the town centre, whereas we've demonstrated for over 40 years that it is a viable proposition at Chigborough. There is overwhelming support from the public and all the public consulted bodies. The planning officer highlights this in the report and there are no objections. So please vote in favour of keeping this popular cafe at Chigborough by allowing it permission to continue to support local tourism and the Maldon district.
Thank you very much indeed. I received a request from two members of Maldon District Council who wish to speak, and I've agreed that they can, but they will be restricted to the 2 minutes as well, and clearly obviously won't have a vote. I'll take them in the order that they arrived. That's Councillor Spenceley first. Councillor Spenceley, you have 2 minutes, as you well know.
Thank you, Chair. I speak to oppose the officer's recommendation as councillor for Heybridge East. I cannot vote on this committee as my ward terminates just 500 yards short of the cafe, yet in every sense it is seen as a Heybridge asset. It is my belief that the local plan, when conceived, was never intended to close down successful and popular local businesses, especially one such as this that is the centre of a lively and dynamic local hub of enterprises. This recommendation is completely contrary to the key priorities of our most recent corporate plan. 1, supporting our communities. Members, if you travel the short distance down Chigborough Road to the Farm Cafe, you will see a facility that is recognisably part of Heybridge, whatever a notional mark on the map may say, and that is central to several major leisure facilities and a number of small enterprises. It employs local people, and if I may share a personal passion, it is an inclusive employer providing supported employment for adults with learning difficulties and disabilities through Essex Cares Limited, a highly rated service working closely with Essex County Council. 2, enhancing and connecting our place. Far from being some sort of excrescence ruining the countryside, the farm cafe creates a pleasant rural hinterland for Heybridge residents. I do not intend to linger on this. The many messages of support and appreciation speak for themselves. 3, helping the economy to thrive. It seems totally illogical to close a highly successful business because it's a few hundred yards outside the town border. It is part of a success story which includes camping, fishing, holistic therapies, food supply and many other activities. Take this away and we diminish the whole of this much underrated local hub. 4, a greener future. Of 18 suppliers of food and products detailed to me, 5 are in Heybridge or Maldon and the rest are within a 10-mile radius. Thank you for listening and thank you, Chair, for permitting me to speak.
Extremely well rehearsed, Councillor Spenceley. Councillor Lagan, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to clarify that I did put the application in earlier and called it in before publication of the agenda. But there's a lot that's been said and been covered already. But just to summarise, I don't call an application in without deep thought because it's based on planning, is based on policy. This is a farm CAF. It's been said that it doesn't support a high street or town centre location, and it supports and provides employment, preservation, promotion and tourism to the area. There are other examples of recent permissions given, as Catherine Matthews has just said. Within the reasons of refusal, policy S8, Section 2103 seeks to protect the countryside and recognises that it needs to maintain a sustainable rural economy and allow for flexibility for developments. It's in our own policy. This application does that. Policy 4 allows for supporting entrepreneurial activity. This proposal supports the council's own policy, and it's not realistic to relocate to a town where it would add pressure to existing businesses as they're not in the same offering. The town centres are under enough pressure anyway, and we've just had a recent restaurant close in Maldon. Therefore, this offering delivers a functional need and supports existing businesses, as my colleague Councillor Spencer has said, with its development. Even the NPPF itself supports economic growth in rural areas. It's very clear, and in itself has not enough detail in this report that's contrary to the NPPF and therefore should be supported. Policy 4 and under section 4.34 calls for the diversification of buildings to alternative activities, and 4.35 also encourages economic growth in rural areas. This application satisfies both those policy needs. The application provides for parking, cycling, tourism and brings in thousands of people per annum. It serves local suppliers and local people. It's a far better offering than the old lodge, with no disrespect. It's an excellent building. The Conservation Officer's report was absolutely glowing about the preservation of this building, and I wholeheartedly advise the members to support this because no objections were raised. If you see page 41, 3.22, it's nothing but positive. Thank you, Chair.
Again, thank you, Councillor Lagan. Well practiced. Members, before I open to comment from North West members, I just wanted to make a few points myself because I think seldom have we had an application that has generated quite so much public interest, except for the major sites, of course. I personally, and I have declared an interest as being the chairman of Visit Essex, and on that basis, and I'm certainly do not wish to be seen to be critical of the officer. The officer has looked at this application, and she has assessed it in line with the policies and has come to her own conclusions. However, they're conclusions that I'm afraid I don't agree with in some respects. I have an issue with the statement that it is not ancillary to an existing operation. Caravan parks were mentioned. Well, this is a camping site, a well-established camping site with a children's playground and glamping pods. So I just fail to understand why this is not ancillary. It's been a tourist destination for a long time. It is also the host destination for the Blackwater Show, which is one of the major events in the district calendar. But as I said, there are permanent camping facilities at the site. So I'm sorry, but by definition, this facility is ancillary. Because if the people staying in the glamping facilities or campsite want breakfast, where else would they go? Which takes me, well, where would they go? They might go to the Tiptree tea room at OC Island. Well, that's not in a town either. And we cannot keep making decisions against rural businesses. We know that Section 88 and 89 of the MPPF is based along planning in favour of the rural economy, and I'm afraid that trumps our LDP policies. I firmly believe that this council should have a can-do attitude rather than a can't-do. We need to be supporting town businesses and we need to be supporting rural businesses. And I'm afraid on occasions we haven't got a good record of either. And I recall certain objections to many applications in the town centre as well. We made quite a few of the restaurants jump through hoops, in some cases unnecessarily. But are we going to tell the many operations, catering operations in rural areas, that they shouldn't be there? I mean, I could list many of them, and not to mention, of course, the Claremont, which we were warned on that night that would set a precedent. Well, here we are again, and I think anybody that's driven past the site in Wood and Mortimer will have seen that building, and you can be guaranteed that when it is open will be certainly one of the best in Essex and possibly one of the best of its kind in the east of England. I also find it odd that last week members would have received a tourism report from Alexis highlighting the importance of tourism, and I find it bizarre now that we're going to be looking at a planning application that actually stifles what we've been told to determine. It's just, we just don't seem to have a joined up approach. So clearly, I have issues. I'm sure that many people will, I hope many agree, and I'm sure some will disagree with some of my points, but I did feel very strongly that this really should be supported. And I will make one other final point, and it is relevant to other applications, is why we're just restricting rural businesses to have one catering outlet. If they're big enough, like a campsite or a caravan park, why are we saying you can only have one catering outlet? Certainly the bigger ones might want a variation. So I just don't see the logic of saying to places, well, if you have one, you've got to shut the other. It doesn't make any sense at all. If there is adequate demand, then there's adequate demand. We should be supporting it. And I've said my piece, and I'm now going to open up to members. I had Councillor Morgan first and Councillor White, and I'm sure there'll be others to follow. Councillor Morgan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, I'm required to not be predetermined in these situations. So I have very carefully, over the last few days, studied the officer's recommendation, the logic, cogency and persuasiveness of it, to see whether it would actually be able to make me or persuade me against the very cogent arguments that have been put forward tonight. And I have to say, I failed dismally. And therefore, Mr. Chairman, can I propose that this application be approved? Do I have a seconder? Yes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Morgan. Councillor White, you were next. It was a very close run thing.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, I've been looking through the policies here, and I'm happy to second Councillor Morgan's proposal.
You don't need to stand, Councillor.
Yep, I'll give you the reasons why. I think we support it because of policy S1, which is a healthy and competitive local economy. Policy S7, which is a prosperous rural economy supporting rural diversification, and policy E4, which is agricultural and rural diversification. Now, if we just go into a couple of these policies, policy E4, which is the agricultural and rural diversification, Part B states that it will contribute to the viability of the agricultural business. It does, it meets that criteria. Part C, it will not impact on biodiversity and wildlife as the building is already there. 4.34. Diversification of agricultural land and buildings is vital to the viability of many farm businesses. That's correct. And 4.35. The Council recognises the importance of encouraging economic growth in rural areas. So these are the policies of E4, which for me it meets completely. Then we go on to policy E5, which is tourism. Under 4.39, the council supports development of the tourism industry that benefits tourists and locals. Well, it meets that. Development for new tourist facilities across the district will be supported. This is in our policy map. 4.40, we need to remain a competitive destination and to encourage the growth of tourism-related sectors. Under 4.41, viability, it has already been proven to be a viable enterprise, and it states we will protect rural businesses. So for these reasons, I propose this application should be approved under policies S1, S7, E4 and E5, which is tourism. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillor Morley.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, I've known this site for years as well, and there is fishing and there's camping there. And I also think with hundreds of houses that have been built recently, and of course the caravan park, and I think it's natural expansion. And I think with any business, it has to grow. You can't just, if you stand still, you go backwards. And I think it'll be vital for the area. It'll be good for tourism, good for the economy. I think it's ideal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morley. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chairman. I will be very brief. For me, I have to say, you know, we have to take a balanced view of the policies, and for me,
Could you aim the microphone at your... Sorry, we
do
rely on it for the YouTube.
I do apologise. Sorry, like the rest of us, I have to balance the policies and give them, you know, weight as appropriate. And for me, the tourism and development of the rural economy trumps the matter of its being outside town centre. I'd like to satisfy every policy, but we can't, and I support the motion to approve. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members? And then I'll let the officer... Mrs Matthews, would you like to respond to any of those points?
Might be a bit academic, but
No, you're entitled to your...
and one thing I was going to mention in the beginning was I wanted to publicly thank my colleagues in admin who have processed all these hundreds of letters that have arrived since the agenda was published, which have had to be dealt with individually, acknowledged, and let everybody know that the application is going to committee this evening. It's been a gigantic effort, and I just want to acknowledge that publicly. There was a couple of things that I was going to mention, perhaps more for information than anything else. So it mentioned about whether the use is ancillary or not. To be able to conclude whether something is ancillary or not, as officers anyway, we would need a lot more information about how big the business is that it's going to be ancillary to, how many customers are, how many visitors to Chigborough Farm as an enterprise, to be able to judge whether the size of the cafe that is being proposed is ancillary or not, because it'd have to be a small part of the bigger business. But in order to say it is small, with any sort of with any sort of conviction, we need more information, which isn't in the application. I think there was a reference in the applicant made a reference to there being no pre-application discussions, but this is a resubmission of a previous application, so it's quite clear what the issues were last time, most of which have been addressed, but there's one reason for refusal which hadn't been overcome. There's also been suggestions that the council shouldn't be closing down a business, but this is the planning application. Whether enforcement action is taken to actually, if permission is refused, whether enforcement action is taken subsequently, that's another decision for another day, and doesn't necessarily follow. But just thought I'd mention that. I'd also wanted to say that, acknowledge that the LDP and the MPF, there are elements of both which would support the proposal. So rural enterprise and businesses and tourism, all those sort of things. Yes, it does, but there are other quite significant particular policies in the LDP that pull in the other direction. And as officers, we are required to assess proposals based on the policies that are in the local plan. And the conclusion that has been reached, I still stand by, but that's based on the policies and assessing that against the information, and the application has been submitted. maybe there's other information that could have come in that may have resulted in a different outcome. And the final point I was going to make is that there seems to be this evening quite a high level of dissatisfaction with the policies in the LDP, and that they aren't more supportive of this type of proposal. And maybe that is the avenue that members ought to perhaps consider going down as part of the council. Is part of the LDP review is look at that element of the LDP and by sounds of it, correct the errors that members are finding in the policies that we are having to use currently. But thank you. That's what I was going to say.
Thank you, and I totally appreciate the fact that you made an honest assessment. And the only thing I would say, in respect, going back to the point of ancillary, just by looking on their website, it shows the caravan park, it shows the glamping pods, it shows everything else. So I think it is.
Yeah, I did think about that, and I think my response would be it's not for officers to go around finding the information to put in as part of the application. Yes, the information might be there, but it's up to the applicant, and they've got a professional agent that they've paid to make their application.
The only other,
But that was the only
I'm sorry, I'm not going to try and be confrontational, but I have to raise a case that this committee had at the end of last year in Wickham Bishops, where the planning officer was engaged at length with the applicant regarding her initial view, and the applicant basically entered into a horse trading agreement with the planning officer and got the planning officer effectively, allegedly, to change the recommendation on the basis that the percentage of affordable housing was changed. And that, in fact, when it came to this committee, was the only reason why the officer made a positive recommendation, and that's behind 9 Church Street in Wickham Bishop. So, I mean, I think that a lot of this difficulty might have been avoided had there been closer communication with the applicant. We're going to leave it at that. I don't know, Mr. Johnson, I know you want to say something before and then I've got Councillor White, and then we'll conclude.
Well, it was in support. Sorry, Chairman. Just in support of my colleague. I mean, I understand the arguments being made, and the arguments have been made on, that there was an existing building used for the particular purpose. The same owner occupier, as I gather, and that had contributed to the rural economy for a number of years. And as officers and as a regular person in any society, we fully understand that. Yeah. But when we're dealing with an application, we deal with what's in front of us, and we deal with the information and any relevant evidence that the applicant puts in with that application. Where there may be exceptions against the policies, because we have a set of policies. Those policies have to fit a whole range of different types of applications. They may fit something that may be, a super store sized, or they could be something of these size. So when we apply these policies, we apply them generally in terms of their principles. If there's any exceptions from the principles, these will normally have to be made by the applicant and put to us, and for us to then weigh it up in the balance. Now, from what I understand, with this particular application, and I am also aware of the previous application, so I recall when this application came around the first time, and some of the issues which have been addressed. So I'm aware of that. Those arguments in terms of how this application would be consistent with policies on the basis of its particular merits. Now, there was talk about it being, part of a wider enterprise. Various operations were talked about in terms of how it supports it, the particular way in which it supports it. That's not the basis of how this application was submitted and detailed for officers to have a full appreciation of that. A lot of what has been said, I'm gathering now just from this meeting, it may be that had the application been submitted, and I'm sort of saying this because there's a bit of criticism about how officers assess applications. Yeah, the onus is on the applicant to do it. Yeah, the onus is on the applicant to go through these processes and detailed why this would be either an exception or consistent with policy in a particular way. If that's not the case, it's not for officers to be making the arguments for them. It's not for officers to be pointing that out to them. So that's the base on which we make this application. Claremont was mentioned. I recall that application. We went through a similar sort of process with that application at the time then. Yeah, because if we just take the policies in the blanket sense that some of that is being made, and I have to say that some comments have been made in this committee here, you can almost approve anything in the rural area, because you can then still make the same argument. It supports rural business and it's a rural enterprise. But that's not the case. You know, there's a clear distinction between town and country, and in terms of the type of uses which we feel, which the local plan sets out is appropriate for each. And where there's an exception, you need to go through the processes. And that's how we assess applications. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Officers, we are not being critical. I think Mrs. Matthews made a very sensible point in that perhaps our LDP needs looking at, and we certainly need protection in the rural areas. Of course we do, from unsympathetic development. But perhaps when we're reviewing the LDP, we need to look at the policies to make sure they align more with what we want. And I'm going to finish off now. Councillor White indicated, then I've got Councillor Stevens.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, I actually think that the policy map is very clear on rural diversification. I mean, E4 is really clear that it will, contribute to the agribusiness. It will not impact on diversity and wildlife because they are often situated on the coast, which is where this is. Then they say it's vital to the viability of many farm businesses, which it is. And I don't understand where they're saying it's a small business, because as far as I'm aware, they've got, I think it's hundreds of acres. I don't know for sure, but then we're not talking about they're trying to fit this on a quarter of an acre or something. They are proper farmers. As one farmer to another, we know everybody farms and they farm properly. They're not. It's not a small holding. It's a farm. And policy E5 tourism. This council supports development of the tourism industry. I don't understand how clearer the policies need to be. So I actually I'm surprised that the recommendation is there, and these are the same arguments we made for Claremont, and I still think we made absolutely the right decision here, and I'm hoping we come to a right decision here, because I think this meets the criteria of all the rural and tourism policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor White. Well, one last, Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. I can feel myself just ending up abstaining, because I think that what our policies say are so important, but I do recognise that some policies are met, and as Councillor Thompson said, maybe you just can't meet all the policies all of the time. But I'd like to be very clear, please, as to whether we are going to impose a condition that I think it was called the Grange, the old restaurant anyway, are we going to impose some sort of condition that must never be a restaurant again? Because that could increase the number of covers to about 65, I think, which does seem a lot and doesn't seem just ancillary to me. Is that what we're doing? That's for members
to decide, Councillor Stevens.
Well, I would propose that we do then.
Well, we already have a proposal, and I will ask the proposer of that whether you wish to request a unilateral undertaking or a Section 106 agreement.
No, Mr. Chairman, I don't.
I'm sorry?
No, Mr. Chairman, I do not.
So your proposal is to just grant this without any further restrictions? Is that your agreement with that, Councillor Miss White? Okay, so the proposal on the table is that this application is granted without a restriction on the previous, which the owner has said is not viable, and we take the owner, but you've heard my views anyway. But that is the proposal on the table. We'll now take a vote by means of a show of hands. Those in favour? Those against? That is carried. So that application is granted. Thank you.
Chairman, could I ask?
Sorry, yes, of
Could I
course.
ask whether there's any particular conditions that members would like to see attached to?
Well, it's difficult because it's retrospective, isn't it? So
Yeah.
I don't think the time limit is obviously not going to be.
No, so there'd be the drawing numbers. I was just wondering whether on this issue of they're tying the use somehow to the Chigborough farm in being ancillary or
Well, I think we're going to run into danger if we're saying it can only be used by customers.
okay, all right.
I just don't think that it isn't being used only by customers now, so I don't think it would be reasonable to.
No, okay. I just thought I'd ask the question while it was, had the
It's getting
opportunity.
customers from a wide
Okay.
area. In
Just
actual
so,
fact.
just standard.
Just the standard. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much
Thank you.
indeed. Members, we're just going to wait and get the other gentlemen in who've been very patiently waiting. Thank you.
Sorry, Chairman, can I just clarify that the conditions will be agreed in discussions with the Chairman and officers? Is that
Correct.
correct?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So thank you, members. I hope you don't mind me taking that out of order, but as you can see, that there was a considerable amount of interest. So the next item on the agenda tonight is 23000894, land adjacent to Oaklands, Kelvedon Road, Great Totham. Who's taking us through this one?
I'm going to take you through that one, Chair.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Okay, this application is for the erection of 4 dwellings with associated garages and alterations, plus the extension of the existing access and provision of parking spaces to Pippins. 2 dwellings would be detached and the remaining 2 semi-detached. The site was recently granted planning permission on appeal. This is a plan of the approved scheme. This followed the non-determination of an application for the erection of 4 dwellings. This is a material consideration of significant weight, as this is a similar scheme in terms of dwelling numbers and general layout. Minor changes are proposed to the access layout and the incorporation of the garage to Pippins and additional parking spaces. This is the proposed site plan, and this is just a close-up of the proposed changes. It's proposed to convert the garage into an office, motorcycle or cycle store. The internal layout of the garage remains unchanged, however the garage door would be replaced. Condition 3 of the proposed permission would ensure the building remains as incidental to Pippins. The parking requirement would be met with 2 spaces located to the side of the building. Here are the elevations for plot 1 and 2, and the floor plans. Here are the elevations for 3 and 4, and again the floor plans. And here are the plans and elevations for the proposed single and double garages. This is the proposed street scene. And here are some photographs of the site. This is the view of the existing access, which would be extended. This is a view of the existing garage to serve Pippins, and the parking would be to the side there, next to the boundary. This is a view from the site, looking back towards the highway and to the existing residential development at Kelvedon Road. This is a view of the site in the context of the residential development and the countryside. And this is a view of the site itself. Members will notice that some works are taking place. This is with regard to the previously approved application. The applicant has sought to discharge the only pre-commencement condition imposed on this permission, which was for the submission and approval in writing of a construction method statement. Conditions 3, 5 and 14 of this permission are currently being considered by the local planning authority. Matters of the position of the site outside of a defined settlement boundary were considered and found acceptable by the inspector due to its close proximity to the boundary. Furthermore, the inspector found no harm given the eastward extension of built form, given its location, existing landscape, and that it's not readily visible at Kelvedon Road and is only apparent from the public footpath. The site's present character appears as domestic garden land. The only harm, well, aside from the building works, the only harm found by the inspector is that the proposal does not accord with the prevailing pattern of development, of which in the planning balance, the inspector afforded little weight due to the sustainability credentials of the proposal. It is therefore recommended that planning permission is granted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. We have one public speaker, Mr. Jackson, I understand, who is the agent. Mr. Jackson, find a seat with a microphone, make yourself comfortable, and then press the button on the microphone, on the bottom there. Yeah. There's a button, Councillor. That's it. And then you have 2 minutes from when you commence speaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, members. I'm a Chartered Town Planner and I am instructed by MAB Building Solutions. Mr. Harding, to my right, is here this evening. He's a director of the company and owner of the house Oaklands, which adjoins the application site. The site was the subject of a previous planning appeal to the Secretary of State and received planning permission on the 27th of March 2023. Planning permission was granted for the erection of 2 4-bedroom houses and 2 3-bedroom houses in semi-detached form. Access was approved from Kelvedon Road along an existing driveway, which serves the public footpath and the residential dwellings Pippins and Oaklands. This application seeks a minor revision to widen the approved access way. This also includes a slight realignment of the road. Pippin's garage is to be converted and 2 parking spaces are shown to the side of the existing garage. Overall, the revisions will improve access for refuse vehicles and fire apparatus who will turn in the proposed turning head between plots 2 and 3. Also for any other vehicles who may be passing along the access road at a similar time, and to provide more room for pedestrians and users of the footpath. The proposals amount to a material change requiring planning permission. However, the changes are minor. The planning considerations remain the same as that considered by the inspector in the determination of the appeal. The slight increase in hardened surfaces will make no difference to the character and appearance of the area. The access will be an improvement to that already granted planning permission. We note that there have been no residents' representations, that Wickham Bishops Parish Council have no comments to make, and there was no response from Great Totham Parish Council. Essex County Council Highways Authority have no objections, and there are no objections from any other consultees. The officer's recommendations is to approve and the application with conditions and revised construction management conditions set out in your members' update. We therefore invite the council to grant planning permission.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Thank you. Members, Councillor White.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is really just an observation. I mean, if it's been allowed appealed, we have, we've got to go with the appeal decision. But I think partly it's the reason for appeal I'm a bit concerned with, because the appeal says it's for the non-determination between the prescribed time and failure to give notice. And this seems to be happening quite frequently. So could officers tell me why it wasn't determined when it should have been determined?
Good question. I suspect it was a long time ago, knowing how long it takes to get an appeal, but...
Well, that can partly be the case.
It's March 23, so it's about 10 months ago.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, that's not uncommon. That's not uncommon. For there to be that gap, that distance. I mean, if there's a non-determination, then there's a right to appeal against the non-determination for the applicant, who may or may not choose to do so.
So it may just have been a day, or it may just have been a day or two over the date.
No, they didn't give a decision by looking at it.
No, we didn't.
Well, if there's an appeal and we haven't made a decision, then we can't then make a decision.
No, but the point Councillor White is asking is why we didn't manage to make the decision in the prescribed time initially.
Right, that's not really something that can be discussed at committee.
Okay.
That's not really a committee matter. I'm not sure why that's been.
Well,
sure why that's been asked.
Well, just because it seems to be coming up a lot lately.
But it's not a matter for committee determination as to when officers.
No. But I think it's. I don't think it's.
Mr. Chairman, one of the officers, I think, wishes to.
Ms. Greenwood, yeah.
I raised my hand, it's actually unrelated.
Oh, sorry.
To the matter raised by Councillor White. I didn't actually deal with the application previously, so I can't answer that question. This is with regards to a members' update. I just wanted to check that my sound keeps dropping in and out, so I just wanted to check that members were aware that there was an update, and this is just with regards to condition 5, which is a pre-commencement condition for reconstruction management plan. We haven't actually received comments back from consultees. However, the plan is exactly the same as the one approved for the previous scheme, save for the hours of operation, which were actually suggested in the condition anyway and have been satisfied. So the wording of that condition is proposed to be changed just to ensure that the management plan is implemented rather than one is submitted again. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Ms White.
Yeah,
Councillor White.
And just to confirm that I'm quite happy with the fact that all the consultees haven't responded, because obviously that's quite common, and I just wanted to raise that point as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chairman. I propose we agree the officer's recommendation, if I can get a second.
Second that.
Any other members wish to speak on this? Before we come to say we have a proposal to accept the officer's recommendation, duly seconded. Those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. That is granted. We now come to item 7 on the agenda, 23000952, 9 Cherry Blossom Lane, Cold Norton, pages 51 to 66. I think that's you, Miss Greenwood, again.
Lisa, you're muted.
Oh, yes, you are. Miss Greenwood, you're on again.
Thank you.
That's okay.
This application is for 9 Cherry Blossom Lane and is for the erection of 2 bungalows with off-street parking and private amenity space. The site is located on the eastern side of Cherry Blossom Lane, just outside of the settlement boundary of Cold Norton, which runs along the southern edge of the site. The application currently comprises of grassland. Immediately adjacent to the south of the site is number 7 Cherry Blossom Lane, a detached bungalow. To the north is the garden area known as Poplars. The proposal follows a previous application from 2017 which sought planning permission for the erection of a bungalow. This was refused by Maldon District Council but allowed it to appeal. Planning permission was also granted by this committee in February 2023 for the erection of a 3-bedroom bungalow. This proposal represents a revised scheme following the refusal of planning permission at the site in July 2023 for the erection of 2 bungalows, including parking. This was a delegated decision and the application was refused owing to the harm caused to the residential amenity of the neighbour to the south at number 7 Cherry Blossom Lane. The current application seeks to overcome the reason for refusal by introducing a 2-metre high fence along the southern boundary and a 1.8-metre high close-bordered fence along the shared boundary and parking area. This would prevent views into the private amenity space of number 7 from bedroom 3 of plot 2. It would also prevent overlooking from the kitchen and lounge of the proposed bungalows. Here is a floor plan of the proposed bungalows. Obscure glazing has been introduced to the hallway and bathroom. Here are the elevations. And this is the cycle store. Here are some photographs of the site. This shows the site from the highway and from the private track. That's the track there with the site just here to the right. And this is a view of number 7 and a view of their driveway and their amenity space. The planning history for the site is a material consideration. Whilst the site is outside of the development boundary, and thus in principle the development is contrary to the policies of the development plan, which seek to direct new residential development to established settlements, the development site abuts the settlement boundary. And based on the inspector's previous comments and previous committee decision, the principle of development has been found to be acceptable, and the development will be acceptable in terms of design and impact on the area. There have been no technical or neighbour objections received. It should be noted that the proposal is only deemed acceptable if the boundary treatments are erected and remain in place, and a condition is suggested and posed in this regard. It is therefore recommended that planning permission is granted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. We have no public speakers. I have 3 members In order, that is Councillor Morgan, then White, and then... Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Oh, right. Councillor Miss White, I'll let you go first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I actually called this to committee because although it went through appeal, the problems I raised during the first time it was refused were still relevant until some time ago. And they were basically that the parish council and residents have spent a lot of money tarmacking the road. And as I fully understand, it's not a planning matter. But I thought that the applicant would be reasonable, and in fact he has worked, I have now heard that he has worked with the parish council, and he is going to not only look after the newly tarmacked road, he is actually going to extend it to cover the houses. So a lot of the objections I had, although they weren't planning reasons, have actually been resolved, but I wanted to make sure they were resolved, and that's why I called the committee. And I only heard this evening from the parish council that they were really happy. So I would like to say that I actually do now support the officer's recommendations to approve this application, and I'm happy to propose that we accept them.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan.
Oh, I just second it, Mr. Chairman.
Thompson.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I was going to say, given the planning history, I'm happy to agree. I was going to make the proposal that we agree that
Proposal's already been made, Councillor
no
Thompson, but so we have any other members wish to speak? No. Members, we have a proposal to agree the officer's recommendation to approve that with the condition suggested by the officer, which is in relation to the boundary treatment. Yes? Those in favour, please show. Thank you. That is agreed. And the last item on the agenda tonight. We now have 23/01003, land at Homefield House, Witham Road, Little Braxted. Who is taking us through this one? Oh, sorry, yes, Fiona. Miss Bradley, yes.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Sorry, just got to find
That's
out.
okay.
How do I move it on? Catherine, just like, you might want to turn the other side. Put this off. Okay. Just click. Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Apologies, members. Let me just get back to where it was. Right. Good evening. This application is described as a change of use of an ancillary storage shed workshop into a key worker family dwelling. Alterations to the outbuilding also include changes in terms of material and fenestration. The site is on the northern side of Witham Road, opposite Sewell's Farm. The site is outlined in red on this plan, with the applicant's ownership also outlined in blue. The site is accessed from Witham Road using the existing access, and it includes Homefield House, which is in the northern part of the site. There are two buildings that you can see in the southern part of the site. The larger one is used for garaging and workshop use, and the other smaller one immediately to the south of it is the subject of this application. GS Howard Transport, owned and operated by the applicant, operates from the site. The Braxted Bakery, also in the applicant's ownership and operation, is adjacent to the site and outlined in blue in the application. There's a large gravel hard standing area which is accessed from Witham Road, and that provides parking and manoeuvring space for the various uses. Plan for the building, at the moment it's just a single storey structure. The applicants will propose to insert a floor so that there's living accommodation on the ground floor with potentially a third bedroom, and on the first floor will be 2 bedrooms, an ensuite and bathroom. These are the existing elevations. The building's pretty much staying as it is externally, just with some changes which are shown here in terms of fenestration and materials. These are considered to be acceptable. Just running through some photos now. This is the view of the site looking into it from Witham Road, and you can see the subject of this application, the building in the background there. And this is just another one showing the entry into the site and the gravel hard standing area. Again, this is just the existing building which is to be converted. The small lean-to on the side of the building is to be demolished as part of this application. Again, just another view of the building. This is the elevation where the front door to the building would be. So again, it's changes to fenestration on this elevation. And this is another view with the subject building on the right-hand side and a view towards Homefield House, towards the rear of the photograph there. And just another one of the building with the larger building that I mentioned before to the rear. Just in terms of the application, as set out in the report, the site is located outside any defined settlement boundary and is in the countryside for planning purposes. The impacts from design, character of the area, highway safety, amenity impacts are all considered to be acceptable. However, the site is some distance from settlements and safe access cannot be provided for pedestrians and cyclists to the nearest settlements due to the narrow roads and the lack of footways. Also, the site's not well located for public transport. Therefore, occupants of the site would rely heavily on the use of the car to fulfil their day-to-day living requirements. The applicant is willing to enter into a Section 106 agreement to tie the dwelling to the host dwelling, Homefield House. However, this wouldn't mitigate the harm of the new dwelling in the countryside in an unsustainable location. Whilst the applicant's son and daughter-in-law would live in the dwelling and also work on the site, they cannot be considered to be key workers, which is how the application is described. Going on, the necessary financial contribution towards the Essex Coast RAMS has not been secured. However, the applicant has confirmed they're willing to enter into a Section 106 to secure this. Accordingly, the application is recommended for refusal for 2 reasons. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Bradley. I think we have one public speaker, Mr Richardson. Good evening, Mr Richardson. Take a seat. You've heard the routine.
Yes. Thank you.
And you have 2 minutes from when you start to speak. Just 1 second and get the timer ready. Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Chairman and members of the Planning Committee. I've been asked to say a few words to Mr Howard and family in respect to the planning application submitted for the change of use of the storage shed and workshop within the grounds of Homefield House to a legally tied residential 2-bedroom property. An earlier application of works of a similar nature was withdrawn, and following constructive feedback received from senior planning officers, a fresh submission was prepared with an emphasis on trying to meet the controls of the adopted plan with special regard to Policy S1 that sets out to achieve high quality sustainable development. The conversion of the existing established and substantial outbuilding shall not adversely affect the character of the area, its immediate landscape, or cause any nuisance, or overlooking any neighbouring properties. The design and conversion have been informed by the many recent successful completed schemes within the district, where buildings of a similar nature, such as Class Q farm barn conversions, can comfortably create modest accommodation. The proposal should not create any material change to the landscaping of the site, and policy-compliant parking, garden area and living spaces afforded with the design. A key point of the success of the scheme is its sustainable relationship with the host dwelling and both family bakery and neighbouring business activities, the haulage business, allowing the proposed residents the ability to live adjacent to their places of work, thus reducing commuting on the roads. Otherwise, the proposed residents would be forced to seek an accommodation elsewhere in the wider area. The volunteering of the Section 106 agreement shall ensure that the legal relationship between the host dwelling and the new property be secured by way of a formal agreement. The applicants have endeavoured to secure the necessary paperwork to comply with the provision of the checking and monitoring fee for RAMS, which they are only recently made aware of and are in the process of doing so. The accommodation provides several benefits and will assist in the development of the work, community and leisure facilities within the site, and also creates a neutral effect on the local road infrastructure because of the travel movements that currently prevail in commuting. We fully recognise the judgment is delicate and finely balanced, but we ask you kindly respect the genuine nature of this proposal, which allows 2 valued members of the working community in Little Braxted to reside in the parish in an affordable manner, which meets their needs and hopefully the needs of generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, I've called in this application. I have to say, I'm I'm not supposed to be predetermined on this, and I've looked again at the officer's reasons for refusal, and I am disappointed. I'm particularly disappointed that no mention was made of policy S7, which states that the council will actively seek to support and facilitate sustainable economic development within the villages through the provision of live-work units and small and micro business space, the support and enhancement of rural diversification, tourism, leisure and opportunities. Also, I would ask that consideration be given to number 89 of the NPPF, which I will quote from, saying planning policies and decisions should recognise that sites to meet local business and community needs in rural areas may have to be found adjacent to or beyond existing settlements and in locations that are not well served by public transport. In these circumstances, it would be important to ensure that the development is sensitive to its surroundings, does not have an unacceptable impact on local roads and exploits any opportunities to make a location more sustainable, which this will do. And I would also point out the fact that the business with the use of car, this is, as most members will know, is beside the Braxted bakery, which is very well served, gets a considerable amount of people driving there, and is also, in fact, there's also a transport company based there. So, and in fact, what this application, if approved, will do will actually stop, as the agent has pointed out, the requirement for the son and daughter-in-law of the applicant to actually have to go out and drive to and from their place of work. And finally, just to sort of it, I have frequently both walked and cycled down the road to that particular site. And therefore, Mr. Chairman, I propose that this application be approved. Do I have a seconder?
Thank you very much indeed. Ms Bradley, did you want to respond to Councillor Morgan?
Thank you, Chair. I think in terms of coming back to reference to policy S7 and policy 89, the reason they aren't specifically included is I didn't think they were particularly relevant. They deal with rural diversification and economy, and this is a dwelling in the countryside, and there's no evidence to justify that dwelling is needed for either of the businesses that operate on the site. So that's why they weren't considered. In terms of no need to commute, that is acknowledged. However, it's still a dwelling in the countryside, and they would need to leave the site for other uses, I think, as I've mentioned in the report, whether they need to go shopping or to doctor's surgeries, school drop-off, that sort of thing. So it doesn't negate the need to travel from the site. Thank you.
I just say I beg to differ in terms of the weight to be given on that.
As is your right. I won't state the obvious and say that there is also a cafe in a rural area that isn't actually ancillary to anything. But anyway, we've left that one behind. So unless there are any other comments from members, we have a proposal in the name of Councillor Morgan, seconded by Councillor Miss White, to approve this application contrary to the officer's recommendation. Those in favour, please show. Those against? One abstain, and that is carried. So that application is granted. Thank you very much. I'm sorry. Sorry.
Well, there's a section one, obviously.
Subject to the section 106 tying the dwelling to. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Yes.
And sorry,
Usual
Chair,
conditions
will be delegated to officers in consultation with the chairman.
Yes. That's fine, Ms. Casey. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very next item on the agenda, any other items of business the chairman of the committee decides are urgent. You'll be glad to hear I have none. Please, members, do not enter into any discussion about tonight's business. Have a safe journey home. See you all soon. Thank you.